Well, education has certainly changed drastically over the last 15 months, with many students suffering from learning gaps. This week in our new series, Learning Lessons, where do schools go from here? We take a closer look at some options being explored to tackle disrupted learning and improve the education system as a whole. Now, in today's installment, we dive into the idea of repeating grades and whether or not the practice should be brought back. With more on this, Monika Ferenczy, education consultant and assessor, joins us now. Monika, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Anthony.
So in terms of assessing, how would you characterize how much these kids have lost over this past year and a half, and how far behind effectively are they in education?
It's really hard to tell, actually, because the disruptions have only allowed teachers to assess a short amount of time when students are in school. It's really not fair to assess students over online learning platforms where they have different situations and contexts in front of them. So we knew...
Continue, please.
So we have some research that's being followed and developed, but we don't know the results of that. But parents anecdotally and students themselves have said that they have not learned as much as they would have if they would have attended 2 full years in school.
Which is so troubling. So it brings back, the idea of repeating grades. Effectively, should parents be given the choice when it comes to this?
It is actually a parental choice. Education decision-making is the parent's purview. It is embedded in the Education Act under the 2006 Education Amendment Act, where it says that especially young children can have additional time for learning. And it's also embedded in practice at the high school level. So we have different age students taking different levels, grade 9 or 10 or 11 to reach ahead, or we have grade 12 or students taking electives at a lower grade level as well. We also have special needs students who are congregated in system classes, and they're multi-age groupings. We have split grades already as a practice. And yet when parents ask if their child can continue in the same grade, which is the terminology that we're using right now, it's not effectively repeating a grade. It's looked at as an accommodation of additional learning time, which is recognized, by legislation and policy, and yet they receive a hard no.
And that's an important reminder, right? Because so often people are, seeing this as a taboo, and a lot of people don't necessarily know their rights going into it. The bottom line is that these kids just need to learn now and definitely in the long term. So how do we do this in terms of, going into this year especially? How do we allow kids to really have that and really catch up from what they lost?
Well, parents have been watching their children learn at home, and so they are the experts right now. They've practically spent more time with their children learning than they have with actual teachers over the last year and a half. So it is common sense that if a parent is saying, look, my child is not ready for the next grade, I would like them to continue in the same grade. If the student themselves says, I'm not ready for grade 7, I want to do a little more time in grade 6, then that should be allowed. And so those students need to have that comfort level, because otherwise stress, anxiety, and students at risk of dropping out in high school is a real factor that we have to consider down the line.
What about shifting it to the boards? Because I don't know if this is still in practice, but they've kind of gotten away from failing kids in some respects, or keeping kids back. Do you think that should be reinstated, if you will?
So that's a practice. It's not based on any policy. The research that's sometimes quoted by school officials is from the 1970s and 80s. And so there's no recent research to back up that position. So this is the troubling part. We have these pieces embedded in legislation allowing this to happen. We have parents who have decision-making rights in education for their children, but we have school officials who are saying no, and for no reason or policy to back them up with. So this is particularly difficult, but some school boards on a case-by-case basis have discussed this with parents and have allowed this. So we have dissonance in educational practice across the province.
Important points. We appreciate all of your insight. Monika Ferenczy, education consultant, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on the show.